Hi, I'm Nick Ellinger with Chief Brand Officer of More, here to do the Test of the Month Club. This month's topic is thanks and no thanks. How to think, when to think, is it effective, when is it effective, those sorts of things. So let's get the obvious part out of the way first. Thinking works. Thanking people makes them more likely to help you in the future. There was a fun test of this with people who were reviewing college students' cover letters. The control was just acknowledging that they got the help. The test condition added a thank you so much, I'm really grateful. Then they asked that person to review a second letter. This probably sounds a lot like your donation methodology, and sure enough, 32% compliance in control condition, 66% compliance in test condition. Which, depending on how you look at it, is either you can double the likelihood that someone will do what you ask them to do by thanking them, or failing to thank someone halves your results. Either way is a legitimate way of looking at it. And this is kind of our water is wet finding, thanking people makes them happy and makes them more likely to do things. So that's the obvious part, and I wanted to just sort of plow through that, but that's where we are. So how does this work in fundraising? The same study took a look at, this was a university doing telemarketing with volunteers, raising money for the university. And then they had a manager come over to some of them and thank them for doing the work and tell them why their work was important. And it was a quick, I think it was 3-sentence-ish script that they were going through. And that 3-sentence in that amount of time was more than a 50% increase in the number of calls made per week by the people thanked. And anecdotally, I found that when I had telemarketers working on my account when I was at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, whenever I or the national president or a victim would come into a call center, gather the troops, thank them for what they're doing, and tell them why they're doing was important, revenues instantly went up for that next little period of time as people felt the glow of that and understood that greater connection to the mission. And it never went back down to baseline. That type of thank you and education really helped those callers for the long term. So that's anecdotal, not a study, but it does jive with what you're seeing here. But the trick is that there is a right way and a wrong way to thank someone. And I did not think about it this way, but there were relationship therapists that looked at videotapes of couples talking, and they coded their thank yous either to other praising or self-benefit. And other praising are that type of language, like it shows you are a responsible person, you go out of your way, talking about the innate attributes of the person doing the nice thing in the thank you. And the other one is, honestly, how I was taught to write thank you notes as a kid. Thank you for the bike, Grandma. I am writing it every day. It is super fun, all of those sorts of things. That type of self-benefit. When you do this for me, it helps me relax. It makes me happy. All of these sorts of, I received this from you and it's been a really positive change for me. Thank you for that. So both thanking a person, but then they surveyed the people before and after. And so let's pause, think about which of these was more effective, and think about what your thank you letter says and what your thank you strategy says. Does your thank you letter say, you are a great person for helping? Or does your thank you letter say, you have created this impact? Your gift helped save these people. It helped provide these services. Johnny has closed now because of you, because of your gift. Probably a combination of both. Usually thank you letters will try to show impact and talk a little bit about the person, probably swaying a little bit more toward your impact. In fact, some thank you notes are impact statements. What they found in this couple's look at things is that when there was other praising gratitude, that increased how much you perceived the other person loved you, their positive emotion, their responsiveness, that thank you helped deepen your relationship with the person. So when you say, thank you so much, this just shows that you are a wonderful person. That sort of identifier of who the other person is, that was really positive. Self-benefit gratitude, the idea that here's what your gift or the thing that you did helped me with, did not have any statistically significant effect at all. And so this study found that the thank you was about praising the person who did the thing, not the thing itself. And this kind of goes back to that donor identity concept that we've talked about for a while. Part of your job as the fundraiser is to make the other person feel like a good person for the deed that they have done. And yes, part of that is showing them that their gift went where they thought it went, but a large part of that is showing them that they are a good person, and sometimes a good specific type of person. You are a proud patriot, or you are a wonderful steward of our shared environment. That type of language that identifies a person and gives them positive attributes in the thank you is very powerful. So how about thank you phone calls? And we've talked a little bit about this study in the past, but there was a study of 500,000 thank you phone calls to 600,000 donors over a long period of time, and it showed no impact on subsequent giving. And wrote about this on the Agitator blog when I was over there, talked about this in the community, and here basically was the response. This is not something that people wanted to hear. And in part because the headline is damning, but the details are really where we want to be focused. As we've talked about in this, thinking depends so much on how you think, who you think, and what you say when you thank them. So let's look at this study and the types of phone calls that were made. The first part is that the calls were made 3 to 7 months after the gift was made, not exactly tying their gift and their charitable action to what's coming up. There's probably a sense on some of these phone calls that you're thanking them specifically for the purpose of getting an additional gift, which, yes, well, it's why we're doing it. It is not a good look to be so transparent about it, quite honestly. So that's perhaps a problem with these phone calls. They also called everyone who made a gift for whom they could get a phone number. They didn't ask about the preferences of that person. So the people who didn't like the call, didn't want to be called, had subsequent giving drop by $3 per year on average. Those who liked the call had subsequent giving increased by $4 on average. So if you can call people for thank yous who have said they like to be called, that's a method, that's a channel that works for them, you can have a positive impact. The trick is that the vast number of people who were called in this case had no positive or negative impact from the call. They weren't strongly against being called, but they weren't in favor either. The people who liked the call, I believe, was somewhere in the 4% of the file range. And so while mass calling for thank yous may not work after the fact, even 3 to 7 months out, calling someone who likes to be called, who enjoys that method of interaction, can be a very positive experience. And then what people said to thank varied wildly in this study. It was because it was over so much time and so many different organizations and so many donors, the how the thank you went down was often lost. And as we've seen, there are good and not as good ways of thanking someone. So this is not a throw out your thank you calls, they are worthless, like some had framed the study to be. Rather, it's how do I take a look at a thank you program? If I'm considering it and I don't have one, how do I do that in a way that makes sense? If I have one, how do we go about making it so that it's better set up? And there's a good question here about why the delay in calling? And honestly, I believe that it was because the way the organizations that they studied had a blanket time of the year that they called, and it was the time that they could get data for. And so if you said, we're going to call everyone in the month of June, well, the gifts that are coming into that, you want to have a solid file perhaps as of March, let's say. And the March file will have donations from the past few months. And so it was a problem with the data, I believe. And then also some people critiqued the survey, the study design. I wouldn't say I critique the study design, but rather look at it as this is what happens if you delay in your giving. I would say that we had a webinar, I think we had a webinar a little while back. I need to look through my webinars. If we have not had this webinar, we will certainly have it soon, about how speed is so vital in so many of our actions. And the particular study that goes into that found that for hospital admit, grateful patient programs, there was a hospital that was batching their mailings that would go out to their grateful patients, and they were sending them out every 3 or 4 months. And so there was this great natural experiment that some people were getting it right after their hospital stay, and some people were getting it 4 months later, just because they chose to look at it. And the half-life of gratitude was about 50% per month. So literally, you had double the response rate if you mailed on day 1 than if you mailed on day 30. And then you doubled your response rate if you mailed on day 30 instead of on day 60. And so that was even true, and in fact, more dramatic for people who had life-saving care done. And so that was even more dramatic. People literally forget that you saved their life 2 to 3 months down the road. What hope do we have with calling 3 to 7 months down the road? Another funny part of this study is that they also asked a group of fundraisers how much they thought response rate would go up with this type of calling. And they thought that subsequent giving would go up 80% on average. And so while we may critique the methodology and things like this, some of this is post hoc rationalization. I know I would have said that giving would go up even with later calling because it is that personal touch point. So I was wrong on this. Another question here was the feedback about whether they liked the call solicited on the call or in a post-call survey. And that was done, I believe, in a post-call survey so that the person who was the telemarketer in this case wouldn't influence the results of whether the person said they liked it or not. So, thank you very much for coming. You are truly a special person for having made time to learn with us today. I am open to any questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A. If you ever want to get in touch with me afterwards to ask questions, my still relatively new email address is nellinger, that's NELLINGER, at mooredmgroup.com. That's mooredmgroup.com. Look forward to getting any comments, any questions, and any volunteers for future calling. We have a question here about using volunteers for thank you calls. Volunteers can be very powerful for thank you calls. I found sometimes more effective than paid telemarketers, if only because there's a personal touch. Now, this is for face-to-face rather than telemarketing, but it's still an interesting study. In a face-to-face environment, people found that if they had a name tag that said either paid staff or unpaid volunteer, both of those raised the trust level in the person who was seeing them and increased giving. And so if you are using volunteers on your calling, I would first make it relatively scripted, but give the person the opportunity to tell kind of their own story there. I would script it in the sense of telling them these kinds of proscriptions about how you want to be thanking the person. But yes, and I would try to make it fairly soon after the gifts are made. So those types of thank-a-thons can be powerful and activate a lot of what you see in this presentation. And then another question, will a recording of the session be available? Yes. These and previous TNPA Test of the Month Club calls will be available on the TNPA YouTube channel. I do have to go in and edit out things that I said that were dumb, as well as all of my vamping on the beginning and the end of calls. Not that everything that I say isn't totally valuable, but some things are more valuable than others. What is the YouTube URL and name again? Gosh, I'm sorry, I don't have the YouTube URL at the tip of my tongue. So I'm pulling this up right now and I'm hoping it will not show on the screen. Let me see here. But it's TNPA is the nonprofit association. Hopefully it's something that you are all considering. I'm sorry, not association, alliance. Hopefully it's something that you're considering all becoming members of, because the association does a really good job of advocating for nonprofit organizations and our issues. And so if you go to YouTube and search Nonprofit Alliance, there are 10 subscribers right now. So if you want to be subscriber number 11, I would strongly recommend it. Gosh, I'm not subscribed myself. I'm number 11, you can be number 12. The association offers individual memberships and organizational memberships. I am personally an individual member, as well as More is itself a founding supporting organizational member. So I'm on both. You can see there are Test of the Month clubs, and you can also see webinars that they've done outside of this. So lucky number 12, Nonprofit Alliance subscribers on YouTube, and then membership. Let me get you. I'm not giving you the YouTube URL because it's a YouTube channel, and then it is a whole bunch of letters and uppercase and lowercase and underscores. But if you search Nonprofit Alliance on YouTube, you will find it. And then the TNPA page is at tnpa.org. And I'm guessing there are TNPA people on here who will also correct me if I went astray on any of my messaging here. So thank you very much for your time today. You're truly special people to have been, joined us today. So glad that we're making this learning community here, and hope it grows ever stronger. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.